Yo, YouTube, what's up with your boy, Sports and Fitness Rants? I'm back, guys. Click that like button. Subscribe to my channel. What's up, y'all? Welcome back, guys. Welcome back, man. Got another great video for you guys today, as usual. You guys know the deal on this channel. It's all about setting the record straight, stopping the lies, stopping the narratives, stopping them from rewriting history, guys. And in this video, I want to touch on something that we touched on, or I want to talk about something that we touched on in the live stream yesterday as it relates to, what changes could the league make to improve the actual product, right? We talk about, how many threes these guys are shooting. And, we talked about, bringing physicality back in the game, right? Bringing back the hand checking and some of these kinds of things. And I mentioned that the NBA should hold these guys to a higher standard officiating wise. Remember, they keep promoting these guys as bigger, stronger, faster athletes. They're more skilled. So if that's the case, they should be held to a higher standard, should they not? The officiating standard should be higher for them. And I believe if they officiate these guys to the letter of the rules, right? You officiated them like the rule book says, right? You call the game the way the rule book is written. I think that would improve the game a lot. We're going to talk about in this video. And I want to thank you guys, man. Everyone across the world, everyone across the states, man. Shout out to all you guys out there. Like I said, man, you guys, I did a couple of live streams this weekend. The first time that I did lives, having people call up. Like I said, I had to use a laptop. So much respect to everybody that came through and supported my live streams. You guys came out yesterday to support the Sunday Live with Michael Jordan fans of the best and everyone else. Thank you very much, guys. Thank you very much. The real recognize real, man. And you guys know what to do. Turn the volume all the way up. Hit that play button. Remember, these videos are for educational purposes. And let's roll. So, yes, guys, like I said, I wanted to touch on something that we talked about yesterday briefly about what could the NBA do? What could the league do overall to help the product, right? To bring back, the casual fan, let's say. What improvements could we make? Now, we've heard ex-NBA players talk about this, current NBA players, ex-coaches, fans, people in broadcasting, the journalists. Many people have been talking about the NBA, what it can do to improve the product. What are the problems with the NBA right now? Like, why is it not as popular as it used to be? And we always talk about the same things, right? We mentioned the three-point shooting, right? That's a common denominator here. These guys chucking up 30, 40, 50 threes a game, some of these teams. It's out of control. It takes away from the balance of the game. So we've talked about that. Also yesterday, Scap brought up bringing back, hand checking. Let's bring back the physicality of the game. And I think that's a great idea. I think a lot of us agree on that. If you brought back the physicality to the league, hand checking, you allow these guys to beat up on a little bit on each other, so to speak, right? Stop calling these chinchy fouls, these touch fouls. Stop letting these guys flop for foul calls. Let them flop around and don't call nothing. If a guy wants to go to the hole and flop, don't call nothing. You don't have to give him a technical foul or give him a flopping penalty. Just don't call anything. Ignore the flopping. Force these guys to fight through contact. Force these guys to play through physicality. Bring back their hand checking. Bring back competitiveness. Because when you bring physicality into the game, you're bringing back a certain level of competitiveness. You're bringing back rivalries. This will be created through physicality, through the physical nature of the game, guys. Those are the facts there. So those are different ways that we could think about bringing the game back, or bringing the popularity back to the game, making it more watchable, making it more entertaining, right? Make it more competitive. These are some of the things that we've talked about. But I also mentioned on the Sunday Live show yesterday that if we were to hold these guys to a higher standard officiating-wise, just think about the officiating standard of the league right now, guys. It's an absolute joke. Do you guys really believe that these guys are so much more skilled than the guys from the other eras? If just by watching them or by someone telling you, oh, look at the way these guys can dribble the ball today. Look at the way these guys can shoot. They could not shoot like that back in the day. First off, that's a completely inaccurate statement. If you think about the conditions, once again, the conditions that these guys played in the 50s and the 60s, let's say, so to speak, and you think about how the rims were hung from the stanchions, right? They didn't have these breakaway rims and all these fancy hydraulic systems and, all of these fancy ways to hang the rims. So these guys were shooting on rims being held by chicken wire. Certain scenarios where you shoot a ball it hits the rim, and because of the way that the rims were hung back then in some of these places, the rims, the backboards will continue to shake, right? Because they're being hung by wires. So now the next time you go to shoot the ball, the rim might still be shaking and vibrating. These are the conditions that these guys played in. So how great of a shooting percentage would you have on paper if you were shooting on rims like this? We all have played basketball in the streets, right? Most of us have played basketball in the streets, and we all know about the double rims, right? You've heard of the double rim. And you know that some of these places that you go to, you have to almost shoot all net every time because you know if the ball hits the rim, there's no way it's going in. It's going to clang so hard off that rim. There's no give, right? These guys, the rims that they play on, there's a lot of give on these rims. They're soft rims, quote unquote, soft rims. Certain aspects of the parks, you have to make adjustments, right? It's just the way it goes. That's the way these guys played in the 60s and the 70s, the 50s. I mean, these guys play in arenas where you were allowed to smoke cigars and cigarettes. So think about playing in a smoke-filled arena. These are the conditions that these guys were playing in, but you're going to read off their field goal percentage and say, oh, these guys ain't had no skills. They're shooting 39% from the field. Once again, go look at the conditions these guys were playing in. Once again, they were playing 3 games in a row, sometimes 3-4 games in 5 nights. Look how condensed the schedule was for a lot of those guys back in the day. Look at the minutes they played, the conditions they played in. They didn't have it easier than the guys today. They had it harder, guys. Not only did they have it harder, the conditions, but the officiating was harder. It was more scrutinized, these guys. So when they laugh at Bob Cousy, or they laugh at this guy because he dribbles a certain way, like Oscar Robertson, or they laugh at Jerry West, or they laugh at this guy or that guy, and they say, oh, look at the shoes these guys are wearing. Look at how short their shorts are. Look at the courts that they played on. Look at how they dribble the ball. Look at how these guys shoot. All you're doing is highlighting their greatness because they were dribbling this way. They were playing the game this way because the game was officiated the way it was supposed to be officiated, the way that basketball was intended to be officiated. When we talk about the guys today being more skilled than the guys in the past, how can that be possible when they're being held to a lower standard? This is what I'm talking to you guys about, the standard. When you're greater at something, when you're more skilled, when you're supposed to be recognized as being superior, then you're held to a higher standard. Are you not? I mention this all the time, guys, the standard that's not being upheld any longer. So they promote these guys as if they're so much greater than the guys in the past, but they always try to tell you that the guys are better today because the guys in the past were not skilled. They were not great, and they laugh at them. Oh, look at the way these guys dribbled. Look at the way these guys played. Look at the way they ran. They're unathletic white guys. Bill Russell and Will Chamberlain played against nothing but short white guys. These are the statements that people will make. They want you to believe, or they want you to think that anyone could make the NBA back then. I mean, think about how it sounds. They really want you to believe that anyone could have walked off the street and been in the NBA. Anyone. But then they'll turn around and say there were only 8 teams in the league. So which one is it? Either the league is so small it's exclusive, or anyone can play because anyone can play back in the day because the NBA was a joke. Which one is it? If there's not that many teams, that means that there's not that many people able to get into the league, which makes it an exclusive league, right? Does it not? Less people, less roster spots. So it doesn't really think or make you believe that anyone can play in the league. But they'll tell you these guys were not basketball players. They were plumbers, taxi cab drivers, construction workers. They were firemen. They did all these other things, right? They were war veterans. They did all these other things. So they're not basketball players. They're those other professions. So they were those guys just happened to be playing basketball. But meanwhile today, what do we see today? Guys not working side jobs. Guys are doing podcasts. Guys are doing all kinds of weird things, going to fashion shows. They do all kinds of strip joints. They do all kinds of things on the off, or when they're off, or when they're not playing during the season. But we're supposed to respect these guys? These guys are podcasters and TikTokers and social media stars, right? And reality TV stars. They're not really basketball players. At least the guys back in the day were still grown men, above all. Now, these guys are not grown men. They're a bunch of teenage kids that are supposed to be grown men, but they're not. And we're supposed to respect them when they carry themselves like kids? Absolutely not. So for me, if these guys are so skilled, they're so much greater than the players of the past, they can dribble better and they have all these moves that they can do. Then let's see them do all of these moves. Let's see them show all these skills under harsher officiating standards. I dare the NBA, I dare them to hold these guys to an actual standard. I mean, hell, even if they officiate the game the way they did in the 80s and the 90s, which was a lot less strict than the guys in the 50s and the 60s. But if they just held the standard of the guys in the 80s and the 90s, that would improve the game exponentially, guys. Probably 100 times over. Because when we talk about these guys and the things that they're able to do on the court, and they're promoting these guys as these crazy athletes and, so skilled, what's allowing them to look as if they're so much more skilled and so much more athletic is the fact that they're able to manipulate the rules like no other era was able to do. If Elgin Baylor was looking the way that he looked in the 50s and the 60s, right, inspiring guys like Dr. J said that he would go out and try to do the moves that he saw Elgin Baylor do as a kid. This is what Dr. J was saying. Think about the creativity and the inspiring game of Dr. J, the icon that he is. This man was inspired by Elgin Baylor. Once again, passing the torch from generation to generation, who in turn inspired Michael Jordan. But when Dr. J talks about what Elgin Baylor was doing out there on the basketball court, inspiring him, showing him, the vision basically, or giving him the vision of what is possible on the basketball court, what you could do out there. Elgin Baylor was doing this under the harsh, strict standard of the officiating. He wasn't allowed to take 3, 4, 5 steps and show his skills that way. He wasn't able to palm the entire basketball and carry it and manipulate it the way that these guys are today. So that helped and assisted him in doing and pulling out these fancy moves. He did this. He was that creative under those standards, under that strict, harsh officiating standard, which makes Elgin Baylor even that much greater. It makes these guys greater. They had to do these things under harsher conditions and under harsher standards. The defenders back in those eras had the advantage. Who has the advantage today, guys? The advantage goes to the offensive player, hands down. The defenders are at a disadvantage, not only because of the rule changes that they made, but just because of the mindset. These guys don't care about defense like that. Why would they play defense? It's not sexy. It's not going to get you paid. So once again, the effort's not there. It's not just the officiating or the rule changes. It's the mindset change. So these are things that we think about. These guys are so great, but the officiating standard's been lowered for them because they're not that great, guys. They're not that skilled. Actually, it looks and seems to me as if the guys back in the day were actually more skilled overall. They had better fundamentals overall. And why would we say this? Because they had to be. They had to be more fundamentally sound. They had to be more skilled because of the officiating standard that they were under. Go watch, guys, just something like the All-Star game in the 90s, guys. These guys were calling travels and carrying violations in the All-Star game. In the All-Star game. They won't even call that stuff now during a regular season. So these guys look better. They look more skilled because of the officiating standard and the way they're allowed to take extra steps. So if we went back in history and we allowed Wilt Chamberlain to take 3, 4 steps, if we allowed Wilt Chamberlain to punish guys with his physicality the way that someone like LeBron James is allowed to use physicality in a non-physical era, right? If we allowed some of these guys like Oscar Robertson or Bob Cousy to carry the ball and dribble it that way, right? We allowed Jerry West to take a crazy 3, 4 step Euro dribble and all this other nonsense, right? We allowed some of these great players to manipulate the rules, right? To not be held to that standard of officiating. What would those guys' careers look like? They would look a lot different, I'm pretty sure. The numbers would look different. Who knows? Maybe they would win more championships. Wilt Chamberlain gets criticized a lot, but the reason why I hold Wilt Chamberlain in such high regard, even though I never watched the man play, is because not only was he a great athlete, many people consider one of the greatest American athletes in all of sports, but he was never able to use the one advantage that he had over everyone was his strength and physicality. He was never able to utilize that to the degree of a lot of guys in their eras. Shaquille O'Neal, for example. Look at the way Shaquille O'Neal was allowed to play the game. And it's a knock on Shaq. He should have been able to use his physicality. That was what he had advantage in. But he was allowed to use it. Wilt Chamberlain was not allowed to use that physicality that way. He couldn't barrel into these guys' chests and use his strength to throw guys around and down low. He wasn't able to do these things. I mean, slam dunking the basketball was frowned on back in them days for someone like Wilt Chamberlain. He played almost like a gentle giant. So for me, what would Wilt Chamberlain's career look like if he played in the 90s, let's say, or if he played in the 2000s and he was allowed to bang guys and use his strength to dominate, but he wasn't allowed to do that? What would Bob Cousy look like, right? What would any of these guys' careers look like if they were allowed to carry the ball, take 2 extra steps, just do whatever they want out there essentially on the basketball court? I'm sure those guys would look a lot greater also on the film. A lot of these guys look good on film, right? They're all those fancy moves, but when you really scrutinize the video footage, what do you see? These guys are traveling and carrying the ball all over the place. Do you guys really respect what James Harden was doing in 2018? Not only was he traveling everywhere with those 3-step drop backs, whatever that nonsense was, not only was he carrying the ball everywhere, but the man was also flopping up and down the court, which he still does. But these guys are winning MVPs. He won an MVP, guys, on the strength of that. Think about that. He's an MVP winner in NBA's history off the strength of the way that he manipulated the rules and was allowed to do that. And nobody was impressed with that. Nobody was supporting James Harden that season. That was an embarrassment what he was doing out there. Getting all those free throws, traveling all over the place. I mean, he was wrapping his arm and hooking his arm into guys. I mean, it was an embarrassment, man. Absolute joke. How many free throws did he get because guys ran into his foot on a step back traveling 3? Did Reggie Miller get those same calls in the 90s? He sure as hell didn't. But James Harden did, and he got his MVP off of that. It's an absolute joke, man. Once again, the standard's been lowered. So, you know, we talked about this a lot, guys. What can the NBA do to improve the product? And there's many things that we can talk about. Adam Silver and the players, the rule changes, the lack of defense and physicality. And to me, the lack of officiating, the standard being lowered so low that these guys aren't even playing basketball out there sometimes. This is why they're allowed to shoot all these threes, because they can break down guys on the perimeter by taking 3-4 extra steps, by carrying the ball all over the place. I would look a lot better, too, if I was able to take an extra step or two when I was in high school, if I was able to carry the ball that way when I was in high school. Maybe I could have made it to college. You guys know that these are the facts, man. The players today can't be more skilled than the players of the past. They just can't be, because they're not being held to a higher standard. If they were so skilled and so much greater, then why are they not held to a higher standard? The standard's actually been lowered for them to appear to be greater. And that's why they're not greater, guys. Those are the facts. You guys know the deal, man. I'll catch you guys on the next one.